Fuck them Cowboys! Yeah! Never lose sight of the magic of this football team. Yeah! Here we go!
I'm all in.
Cowboys fans, it's your host Slater here. If you bleed silver and blue and you want honest talk, no filters, you're in the right place. Leave a comment, like, subscribe, and enjoy the video.
Around, essentially. All right, so we're going to move right on, and we'll go into that second position, sitting behind DeMarvion Overshone, which is going to be Marist Liufau, who this is his first year. He's 24 years old. He was a third-round pick in last year's draft. He was available for the entire season, and he didn't always start, but when he was in the game, he produced 16 solo tackles, 2 assists, 1 forced fumble. I remember that. 1 sack, and he actually had 6 total pressures. I think they kind of used him pretty often in that NASCAR package where it was just, blitzing off the end. Did a good job at it. I think this young man has a lot of potential. I just think it's about maturing and gaining some of that experience. Now, on his run defense performance, he had 4 stops, which is kind of modest. The 1 forced fumble, 7 missed tackles, right? Which is an elevated miss rate relative to tackle totals. That's not really a good thing. What all that means is Liufau's run defense was inconsistent, kind of on a snap-to-snap basis. When he did arrive where he was assigned to be on time, he finished with force, often, making a great tackle. Remember the forced fumble that he had, and then you see what kind of impact he can bring when he knows where he's going and he's got you locked in, with especially on special teams. We've seen him do those things. The missed tackles kind of suggest that he needs some pad level work and that he may have trouble disengaging from his blocks. And he does tend to over pursue at times. All of this kind of says that his ability is there. The physical intent to do harm is there. That's kind of his gift, is he just goes like a bullet. But it's the efficiency and finishing that really needs improvement. And I think he's best suited for gap sound, limited range run defense. So he's just kind of like almost like a bigger Wilson. He's really good around the line of scrimmage and he can do damage there. But if it's coverage, pass coverage especially, he may not be able to make those kind of one-on-one plays. But in the croc, he's doing just fine. Now, pass coverage, he did allow a passer rating of 134.4, which considering is pretty high.
Yeah.
Coverage is his biggest liability. He has late reads in zone drops. He allowed a lot of separation underneath, covering, tight ends and running backs. He has a limited recovery speed. Now, he is bursty in the short distance, but his recovery speed is not the best when he, and I think that's more from just he's a little slow yet diagnosing what the play is. So by the time he realizes where he needs to be, he's got to try to make up ground, and he just doesn't have the kind of speed to do that. I think he was targeted when he was on the field and not being used as a blitzer or a gap filler. I think, they took advantage of him on some of those plays. I give his zone coverage a below average grade. I think he needs protection via a scheme, and he's definitely not a linebacker that you're going to match up intentionally with a tight end or a running back to go down the field against. From me, just with his skill sets and what I saw from the tape just for this year, I think he's best kept in a shallow zone or around the line of scrimmage as a spy. I don't think he needs to be on the field for really long downs, like if it's a 3rd and 12 or something like that. I think he's someone you pull off the field for that. Now, he does have blitz and pressure impact. He had 6 pressures and 1 sack, which is pretty efficient for the amount of snaps that he had this year. He shows really good timing when it comes to a blitz, great angles, good effort. He knows how to delay his pressure so that the blocks all get to where they're supposed to be, which leaves him a lane to the quarterback to be disruptive in the backfield. This is the area where his value most clearly exceeds baseline expectations. So blitz verdict, is basically above effective. It grades pretty well.
Yeah.
So all this, his run defense is a C, his zone coverage or coverage altogether is pretty much a D, and his blitz impact is a B. So for me, I'm going to give Marist Liufau a C grade as a will linebacker based on what he's shown this year.
Okay, I like that. With Marius Liufau, here's the biggest thing for me. I mean, it's he's super energetic. He's super fast. He's got a lot of a kind of that overshown aspect that we just talked about with him. He bounces around a lot. His biggest thing is he needs to maybe learn to slow the game down a little bit of his ability to figure out how to read plays a little bit better. And that just takes with time, playing, and experience, right? This guy wasn't a first rounder. This guy was acquired again in the third round in this past, or not this past draft, but the draft before. So right. Again, this is kind of a project kind of thing. I think anybody outside the first 2 rounds are kind of all projects, right? These are guys that take time. They need to be under a consistent defensive coordinator, learn a consistent scheme, or they're always going to be behind the 8 ball because they don't have that consistency to grow their skills. You go from Mike Zimmer to Matt Eberflus and now somebody else who may change up everything again, which it may suit him better, right? I don't think anybody on this defense is benefiting from the zone scheme at all. So a man scheme, being able to say, hey, this is your job. This running back is your job on the read option. You've got the quarterback or whatever, right? You understand that better than being like, hey, you've got this area. And then, if no one's in that area, you got to come forward and spy the QB. But if the QB's not going to scramble, you got to drop back again. Whatever the confusion or one word, simple terms that Eberflus and them are using that did not work at all. That being said, I like the C grade. I think it's fair because his impact on when you're looking at a linebacker position has not really been impactful. You couldn't give him a B or an A because you haven't seen enough of him on the field. Right. Now, if we were including his special teams ability, we could probably bump it up to a B, right? But for this, we are looking at positional skill. So this isn't like, hey, we're going to bump you up because, you've got that awesome special teams. Obviously, I think he deserves to stay on this roster for his special teams talent. But for now, the C grade fits him very well. I think you did a good job with that.
Yeah, there's not a ton of players that get drafted that automatically start and achieve from day one and are never finding themselves not starting. You know what I mean? It's very rare. He's young, and the good signs is they know how to use him, because what he is good at, they use him for that and he succeeds. That is a key thing. When somebody knows that your talent is this and they send you out there to execute your talent and you execute and you produce a result, that just confirms what they saw in you and what your ability in skill set is. And I think that's what they're doing with him now. As you get older, you learn more with experience, and you can use those skills to improve in those categories. And just like any other player, he's going to improve. There may be a period of time where he's the starting middle linebacker or the starting Will or the starting Sam. It just takes time. This is his very first outing. And I think for what we have in him, he's definitely making an impact, and he'll only continue to grow and get better. But yeah, looking at him as a special teamer, man, he's dangerous out there. You do not want to hit that guy one-on-one because he's going to cause you some pain. And that's a good thing. So if we can and you're starting to see a trend here with our linebacker.